This just confirmed what we all feared. We have an official diagnosis on Reed Garrett, which forces David Stearns to get active this offseason. Though upset about the news, fans are hopeful that the president of baseball operations is going to do what it takes in free agency and trades this offseason to right the ship, particularly focusing on the pitching front, which is exactly what we're doing, only here on Mets Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda, and before we discuss the Met bullpen future, we got to talk about some subscribers, and that being the fact that 72.1% of you that watch these videos aren't one. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here on Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in with a quick plan for the day. First and foremost, we're going to break the actual news, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler update. Reed Garrett yesterday underwent Tommy John surgery and therefore will miss the entirety of the 2026 season. So we'll go into that in depth, and then we're going to follow that up with where does the bullpen stand with this news, and then we're going to wrap it up by talking about what Stearns needs to do with this offseason, particularly on that pitching front. But before we get into that, note this crazy statistic. Now that Reed Garrett is undergoing Tommy John surgery, he is the 5th New York Met pitcher this season to have the procedure. It is insanity. The Mets always, throughout their entire history, has seemed to have problems with pitchers' elbows to the point that they always need Tommy John surgery. You really can't find a Met who has been a sustainable Met, a good New York Met, that hasn't undergone this procedure. It's absolutely insane. To go along with Garrett, it is Edwin Diaz, Danny Young, Frankie Montas, and Tyler McGill. All of them underwent Tommy John. So with that, let's go ahead and get the details on Reed Garrett and on this Tommy John surgery. And we're going to get it from the New York Met insider of MLB.com, Anthony Giacomo. He says, no matter what the Mets do to their bullpen over the offseason, Reed Garrett will not realistically be part of it in 2026. Garrett underwent Tommy John surgery on Wednesday, the team announced, knocking him out for all of next season. Now, why Tommy John surgery? Well, Garrett's had a lot of elbow problems, particularly the last 5-ish weeks of the 2025 regular season, and this hopefully should fix them. So what are these elbow problems? Well, Giacomo has you covered with that. He says, thus ends a months-long saga of right elbow issues for Garrett, who missed most of the campaign's final 5 weeks. Initially diagnosed with elbow inflammation in August, Garrett spent a minimum stay on the injured list before returning to make 4 appearances in mid-September. When Garrett began feeling renewed discomfort in his elbow, however, the Mets shut him down and sent him for an MRI, which revealed a sprain. Doctors ultimately recommended Garrett undergo a UCL reconstruction to fix it. So, what will the surgery do in terms of a timetable for Garrett? Well, we heard it earlier. He's done. He will not pitch in 2026. As the operation, which typically carries a recovery timeline of 12 to 18 months, should keep Garrett sidelined throughout next season. He became the 5th Mets pitcher to undergo Tommy John surgery this year, like I mentioned earlier, joining Danny Young, Edwin Diaz, Frankie Montas, and Tyler McGill. Drew Smith and Christian Scott also underwent the procedure last year and are still recovering. It is absolutely insane how many New York Met pitchers go down with Tommy John surgery. It is just ridiculous. So before we go ahead and dive into Garrett a little bit more and where this bullpen is at, let's take a quick look at his statistics. And overall, it looked like he had a nice-ish season. 3.90 ERA and 55 1/3 is not terrible whatsoever, especially for a guy who's relatively cheap on the books. But when you look at this, you can tell it's a little bit skewed. He was great in his 1 inning in March, pitched 10 2/3 scoreless, unearned, no earned runs allowed in the month of April over 10 2/3, 1.38 ERA in May, and then he just fell off a cliff. 7.36 in June, 3.97 in July, 8 flat in August, and in 4 games, a 9 flat in the month of September. He completely fell off, but regardless of if Garrett was the best relief pitcher in the world, he will not be pitching in 2026. So how are the Mets going to respond? Well, here is how the bullpen is going to look with how it looked at the end of the season. This is everyone that was active for the last game of the year, that game 162, that I don't think anyone wants to be reminded of because, of course, they lost with the Reds losing and therefore the Mets didn't make the postseason. Whatever, we're past it. Edwin Diaz, of course, our closer, but he has an opt-out this year. It is a player opt-out option. So in all likelihood, Diaz is going to opt out of his contract and test free agency, which is going to test David Stearns, because if you've looked at Adam's videos over the past couple of days, he's been talking a lot about Pete Alonso. He also opted out. So now you got to deal with Alonso and Diaz possibly leaving. Ideally, the Mets ink both of them, but we will see. For me, it is do whatever it takes to bring Edwin back to New York. He had probably the second best year of his career in a New York Met uniform this year in 2025. 2022, he was just next level. 2019 with the Mariners. So you hope that Diaz comes back, they sign him, and he looks like the Edwin Diaz we all know and love. Now, working down the list, Ryan Helsley, he'll be a free agent at the end of the year. Tyler Rogers, free agent. Ryan Stanek, free agent. Gregory Soto, free agent. Brooks Raley has a club option, which you would assume the Mets are going to pick up. Keeps a lefty, a sustainable, a good lefty in that Met bullpen. So ideally, the Mets will pick up that option and they will keep Raley. Huascar Rosman is under arbitration, so he's still under control regardless of how that works. And Dylan Ross, who was brought up for a cup of coffee, is pre-arbitration. Now, do note, AJ Minter will be back. He missed last year with an injury, as will probably Danny Young and Christian Scott, like we heard. But this is not enough. With all of these guys leaving, David Stearns is going to have to get active. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's going to have to do something, address this pitching staff that is honestly not looking terrible, especially on the starting pitcher side of things. You got Brandon Sproat, you got Jonah Tong, who both looked okay to probably good. And then you have Nolan McLean, who looked incredible in the 8 games that he pitched. You pair that with Kodai Senga, who is rumored to be traded right now, but could be back. Sean Manaea is still on this roster. Ideally, in my eyes, you make Clay Holmes a reliever, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But regardless, let's take a look at how the bullpen fared last season. Do note, they were the best in terms of ERA for the first 2-ish months. And when you look here, they're highlighted on this stat, a 3.93 bullpen ERA last in the MLB. You take away those 2 months, and they're a bottom 5 team in bullpen ERA. So for David Stearns, it is a must to address this pitching staff, especially the bullpen. Now, we talked about this, but what does it mean? What do they need to do? Well, when you go back to those guys that we saw last year, Gregory Soto was okay. I don't mind them bringing him back. Tyler Rogers was pretty iffy, in my opinion. He was good. His ERA is going to look good, but it seemed as if he always gave up inherited runners. So if Carlos Mendoza, who will be returning, we've talked about this, if he knows how to use him correctly, then sure, I'm all in for bringing back Tyler Rogers. People are going to say I'm crazy for this. Let me know if you think I'm crazy. I don't mind bringing back Ryan Helsley. I know he was a disaster for the first month and a half, but he looked really good over the last 2 weeks of the season, particularly when he stopped tipping his pitches. So you hope that he does that again in 2026 if the Mets sign him back. Ryan Stanek can go, in my eyes. I don't care if he doesn't return whatsoever. I don't care about Cedric Mullins as well. When you go over this trade deadline, I don't care if he leaves. It wasn't a good trade deadline nonetheless from David Stearns. But on that pitching front, that's what I'm focused with. I haven't looked at the free agent market, so let me know down there in the comment section if there's anyone that I'm missing, anyone that's super good that the Mets can go ink up. I like Clay Holmes going back to the bullpen, especially if you expect Sean Manaea to be better this year, maybe David Peterson to be better this year. Kodai Senga's back. You got the 3 young pitchers. You have a good enough rotation, a serviceable enough rotation on paper, so you hope that these guys perform. For me, it's don't go out and make a splash on the starting pitching end. For me, you got to go and get your guys in the bullpen. Lock up Diaz and go get a lot more of sustainable players, guys that are going to have success. So we'll see what David Stearns does. This is a massive, massive topic throughout the entirety of the offseason. How is Stearns going to address this pitching staff? What is he going to do this offseason? Well, we got you covered here on Mets Digest, so stay tuned for all of that. But unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you in this update video that Reed Garrett underwent Tommy John surgery and is done for 2026. So don't pencil him into the bullpen for the New York Mets staff or for any team for that matter. But unfortunately, like I said, this is all the time I have for you today. Thank you so much as always for watching, and let's go Mets.